On our last episode, we discussed sustainability in traveling and adventure, but this time we're going to dig a little bit deeper. A lot of times we think we are doing the right thing, but are we really? Today we're going to look at the principle of leave no trace and go a little bit further than that, and let's talk in general about outdoor etiquette. We're going to look at 3 different areas, basically appearance and landscape, dealing with wildlife, and then social, dealing with the other people, the other adventurers, and the other people that you find in your travels. We all want to be good citizens and do the right thing, but sometimes we just don't know what the right thing is. Today I hope to answer some of those questions for you. So let's get started. So like I said, we're going to go through 3 main categories. The first one we're going to talk about is appearance. Then we're going to look at dealing with the wildlife and how to be around wildlife. And then finally, we're going to deal with all the other people that are out there adventuring just like you are. So let's start with appearance. The number one thing we always hear is leave no trace. So what exactly does that mean? That means when there's trash cans, use them when provided. Otherwise, you're expected to pack out any trash or belongings that you bring to wherever you're going. That includes toilet paper. We're going to get to that a little bit more later. In some areas, if you do leave behind litter or any other things behind, somebody literally has to helicopter it out, particularly in these remote areas, or else you're asking somebody else to pack out your trash. Definitely not cool. Leaving no trace means also taking out your biodegradable food scraps. We say, what's the problem? It's going to degrade, right? What's the big deal? The problem is that the native animals are going to start to smell the human scents on those scraps of food and then learn to associate humans with food. And so now you're contributing to making these animals pests. Plus, you could be messing with their digestive system, or they might eat some rotted food and then get sick and or die. Even worse, in the case of bears, you could be responsible for giving that bear a death sentence if all of a sudden they associate food with humans and then all of a sudden they have interactions with humans. The rangers are either going to shoot them or transport them to some remote area. Both an unpleasant solution for a problem that wasn't the bear's fault. So just keep the food scraps and bring them out with you, or eat them. And like I said, this also includes your toilet paper. I know you think, oh, that's so gross. You get a baggie and you put your used toilet paper in there. You say, well, I bury it. The animals will dig up your toilet paper and leave that strewn all over the place. And like Lauren told us in our last episode, even in the best of circumstances in the wild, it can take up to 3 years to decompose toilet paper. So even though it seems real fragile when it's in the toilet and seems like it melts right away, in the wild, it doesn't necessarily do that. So label a big baggie. I use a gallon trash bag. I leave it in the top little bin of my backpack. And in that goes use toilet paper. If I have any feminine needs, those go in there. Any wrappers, any food scraps, anything that is going to be garbage goes into there. And then the next time I get to town or find a trash can, then I can put it away safely. You want to be a bigger hero? Practice leaving a negative trace. That means instead of just leaving no trace, when you see other people's litter, pick it up. Sometimes you'll see people in their campgrounds try to burn the unburnables, which drives me up the wall. They'll try to burn cans and bottles, which obviously is not going to go anywhere. Pack them out. If you have to go to the bathroom in the wild, which all of us are going to have to do at one time or another, you want to try to choose a spot at least 200 feet from water, super important there, a trail just as a courtesy, or a campsite also as a courtesy. To do your business in the wild, you want to dig a hole about 6 to 8 inches deep. Some people bring a little scoop. I usually just use a stick or a rock to dig out my hole, and then do your business. If there is a stick handy, it's good if you've done the number 2, kind of stir in your waste with the soil and the leaf mold. That kind of helps it decompose faster. And then you want to cover your hole. And remember, your toilet paper is going to go back in your trash zip bag. If you happen to be in a camping area, I think it's also courteous to leave that stick in an upright position. That lets other future campers get the idea that, ooh, maybe that's not the best place to dig my hole. It's kind of considerate. In some areas that are particularly overused and or especially fragile, you may be required to even pack out your fecal waste. This is what you truly call brown bagging. And in other areas that don't get a lot of rain, the rangers may ask you to spread your waste over the rocks so that also speeds up the decomposition. I know that sounds gross, but remember, we're trying to protect these very fragile areas, so you want to follow the ranger's instructions on whatever they tell you to do. So before you head out, be sure to check with the rangers or the visitor centers and find out what is the protocol for the area that you're visiting. In addition to leave no trace, you want to leave everything that you find behind. So you want to leave things in the same condition or even better than you found them. That means don't bring any souvenir rocks or flowers or seed pods or etc. back. Leave them for the next person to enjoy. And I know I've been guilty of this in the past before I learned any better, but I finally realized that we should just bring back our photographs and our memories. Unless it's encouraged, again, by the park rangers or whoever's in charge of managing the area that you're visiting, don't make cairns with rocks. Cairns are those little stacked rocks that look very zen-like. There are also rock piles that are used to designate trails for you in some areas where signage is not possible. I think they're very pretty, and they are very necessary in some trails when that's the only signage that you would have to know that which direction to go on a trail. And likewise, don't go knocking over any cairns in case that is one of the trail markers. Let the rangers and the trail maintenance people decide what cairns and what trail markings need to be there and let them take care of all that. And in the same vein, try not to disturb things and leave items in their natural condition, whether it's rocks or vegetation. I know when you're making your campsite, you don't want sticks or sharp rocks protruding into your tent. I get that. Lightly brush away the sticks and the rocks that could puncture your tent, but don't make big pads of beds with boughs and pine straw and such like that. And in the morning, you want to bring it back to its natural state as best as you can. In the same vein, try not to disturb things and leave items in their natural condition, whether it's rocks or vegetation. Don't go messing around with any cultural or historical artifacts, including pencil rubbings of gravestones and markers. I know it's cool, but if everybody did that, then there would be no etching there for people to see in the future. Like I mentioned in the last episode, in one alpine area I was hiking in, they said that these teeny tiny little lichen mossy things on the rocks took over a decade to get to the size of a quarter. That said, unless there's a specific trail, and you're out hiking in the tundra where there is no trail, it's better to spread out. So by fanning out, you'll be minimizing impact on an individual plant. So this is where, again, it helps to talk to the rangers. But the general rule is, if you see a trail, stay on the trail. And if you're in the backcountry where there is no trail and you're in a fragile environment, then you spread out. And let's talk about trail sustainability. I know it's a pain, but if you come to a puddle, the idea is to walk or bike through the puddle rather than forming a new trail around it like you'll see people doing because they don't want to get their feet wet. This is how to keep a trail sustainable. Likewise, if you come to a switchback, don't go cut corners literally. They do the switchbacks, A, because it makes it a little bit easier for you, but B, we don't want the water running off between that. And if you form these little, quote-unquote, little trails, that's where the water's going to go. And you're going to really, really hurt them in their trail maintenance. All right, we talked about appearance. We're going to leave it as good or better than we found it. Now let's look at wildlife. Number one rule, do not feed the wildlife. Not only are you going to be teaching the animals to beg, you're creating a pest. And if the animals become dependent on humans feeding them, when the tourist season is over, the animals may have difficulty learning how to fend for themselves. So therefore, you're hurting them and not helping the wild animals when you feed them. This also includes, let's say you see a wild apple tree and there's a deer or something trying to coax the deer to eat the apple. You're emboldening these animals and making them comfortable around humans, and this is not cool. It's best if the animals learn to keep their safe distance away from us and not get comfortable being around us. This means feeding even by leaving little scraps, be it crumbs on your picnic table. You want to clean up all your camp area and your picnic table area so there's no crumbs or little small pieces of food that can turn the little small wildlife into pests. Another super important thing, don't get too close to wildlife. Particularly in this age of Facebook and Instagram, everybody's trying to get the perfect shot. But the rule of thumb is if the animal starts changing its behavior, you're too close. And for your safety, with certain animals, you want to keep certain distances. It's certainly not worth getting hurt or even worse to capture that perfect shot of the moose or the bear. The general rule of thumb is actually use your thumb, okay? I want you to close one eye, and then with the eye that you have that's open, hold your thumb up to that. And if you can cover the animal with your thumb, then you're at a safe distance. Roughly, this is going to work out to about 100 yards for large animals like bears and moose, and about 25 yards for most medium-sized wildlife. Whenever you get to the park, wherever it is that you're going, again, you want to check with the rangers about the requirements where you're visiting, because some have different standards. For example, in Olympic National Park, they have even stricter requirements than what I just told you. And they're doing this for your health and safety as well as for the animals. Just bring some good binoculars or use the zoom on your camera to get a closer look. You can actually use a scope and your iPhone to get a really cool picture. If you need to get better leverage, put your elbows on your rib cage or your knees, and that can help steady your hands so you get a better look with your camera or your binoculars. When you're around animals, try to be quiet and still so you're not going to startle or scare them. It's our quick movements and noises that make wildlife feel threatened. And a threatened animal can behave very unpredictably, and that's where you get scratched or bit or worse. Dogs. I know we all love our dogs, but there's a lot of places our dogs just don't belong. But if they are permitted and you insist on bringing your dog, keep it on a leash, a maximum 6-foot leash. This is not only being considerate to the other people out in the parks, but it's also safer for your pet, especially when you're in bear territory. You do not want a bear confrontation with your dog. And also, as a consideration for the rest of us, when your dog is on a leash, you're going to be able to see where your dog goes to the bathroom so you can pick it up and pack out its waste. Another note on animals in general, if you're in an area where they allow horses, the horses and the livestock always have the right of way. So if you're hiking and you see horses coming along, you're to stand aside and let the horses pass. Always. Always the horses have the right of way. And just speaking of the general rules of who yields to whom, bikers and hikers yield to horses. Remember, everybody yields to the horses. And the bikers are supposed to yield to the hikers. Now let's talk about some of the social things of how we can be considerate to others and how we can mind our manners in the wild. I think this one's kind of important. Be quiet. If you want to listen to a music or podcast, please use earbuds so that your audio doesn't interfere with the enjoyment of nature by others. I personally find it very offensive if I'm walking down a trail and somebody has just got their music just blaring. I go out there for the quiet, as do most people that I know. And yes, it's great that you enjoy your music, but do so privately. We don't necessarily want to hear it. We may not even like your music. Number 2, don't block the trail. If you're stopping to take a break, step over to the side so other people can pass without too much encumbrance. I shouldn't have to say this, but I've seen it happen more than once. Don't set up your campsite right on top of the trail. And what's the rule when you're hiking on the trail and you see somebody coming your way? Who gets right away? The rule is whoever's going uphill has the right of way. So the person that's heading downhill should find a place to step aside and let the person uphill, while they've got their momentum, continue on. Sometimes they'll wave you by because they want to rest, but that's their call. And usually what I do anyway, I think I've brought up with my southern manners, is when I see somebody coming on the trail, I make eye contact and we do little gestures, but I usually indicate that I'm going to step aside to let these people pass. And you usually have enough distance that you can see and look for a good place to step off the trail, and it seems to work out just fine. Basically, you just want to be polite, kind, and generous. You also want to observe group size limits, particularly when it's stated by the sites that you're using. Often 10 is like the max allowed of a group. And if you're in a group, likewise, just with a couple people, don't take over the whole trail. As much as possible, you want to hike as well as bike, single file, and certainly no more than double file. That way people can pass and come and go without saying, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. And it's just a considerate thing to do. When you do pass other people, pass on the left and announce yourself. Passing on the left, good morning, something, let them know so you don't scare the bejesus out of them. If you're on a bike, ring your bell so you don't scare them as well. And remember, bikers yield to the hikers. Although personally, when I see a biker coming, I always step off the trail a little bit and let them pass. Whenever possible, you want to try to choose times to hike or bike when it's less crowded. It makes it more pleasant for you as well as for others. Another important thing is not just to be considerate, but to be informed. You should know what the weather forecast is before you head out and bring the appropriate gear. You want to know the terrain and what's going to be expected of you so that you're capable of doing the activity without the assistance or, God forbid, some rescue. You want to train for your activity so that you're not holding up your group. And remember, it's up to you to bring the proper gear and to have the proper fitness levels and be prepared for self-rescue. You want to go into wherever you're going with a map, know how to navigate, know how to read it. And I'll put a link to the previous episode on what to do if you get lost in the woods. You should know those skills. And before you even head out, be sure to let somebody know where you're going, when you expect to return, and when to sound an alarm. These are considerate, and they can also help save you a lot of aggravation and possibly even your life. And it's always nice to be nice, even if people are not being considerate. It's always okay to nicely ask others, could they please tone down their music or their voices, or, perhaps it'd be good if they could pack out their trash, etc. But keep your voice calm and polite, and try to give people in your mind the benefit of the doubt and assume that they didn't intend to bother you or be inappropriate. Now let's talk about camping and campfires. How do you choose a campsite? If they have pads, use those when they're provided. Otherwise, you want to try to choose a durable surface that's resilient, such as sand, gravel, rock, dry grass, snow. These surfaces are much better able to recover from heavy use. You also want to allow space between you and other campers. That means don't set up your camp right next to another camper unless the campground is packed and that's where they've assigned you. If you're free camping and you see somebody, don't go assume that you can just go camp right next to them. Try to find a site where you can't see or hear each other, both for privacy and so that you can both enjoy the nature that you're both out seeking. Don't assume that other campers or even other hikers want to hang out with you. Some people go into the wild for solitude. Just don't take it personally. Look out for the verbal and physical cues, and then you can act accordingly. It's always nice to say hello, but don't expect to have a chat with everybody you come across with on the trail. You also want to keep your noise level at your campsite such that only those in your immediate campsite area can hear it. And this includes not just music, but your children, your pets, and adults, especially after they've had an adult beverage or two. All of us. We just need to be considerate of other campers in our vicinity. When cleaning up at camp, use only biodegradable soaps. To wash yourself, I use dehydrated baby wipes. That's right. I'll buy a big old bag of baby wipes and just leave it open until they all dry. That way, it's not a lot of weight, but I try to minimize weight whenever possible. So I bring the dry baby wipes and then reactivate them when I get to camp. And I use those to bathe myself. That and a bandana to get the really gross stuff off. And I'll clean myself that way rather than going into a stream or a pond, because then you're getting sunscreen and bug spray and all that, and you're actually polluting the water. So clean yourself first and then jump in the water. The same goes for washing dishes. Use the biodegradable soap, or what I do is I just use the boiling water to sterilize my stuff. And I don't use any dish soap at all. Remember, you want to pack out all your food scraps. So I take a little scrap piece of cotton fabric, I strain my food through that, and then I put that in my garbage zip bag. I have a very small piece of cotton too that I use as my dish rag, and I keep that in another separate little snack bag, and that's my dish rag. And so at the end of the meal, I sterilize everything with some boiling water. Brushing your teeth. Remember, from the bear episode, we want to avoid things with scents. I don't think there's a toothpaste out there that doesn't smell. So you want to spit your toothpaste spit, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call that stuff. You want to spit that in the campfire. Any smells are going to attract critters and bears. Now let's talk about the campfire itself. More and more times and more places, they're now being discouraged, particularly in the wildfire territories. So here's some campfire thoughts. Number 1, you want to keep it small or go without. The days of the big bonfires are over. And you got to use your common sense. If it's been really dry, go without. If it's windy, go without. An ember from a fire can travel a mile, so you want to be sure to control your fire at all times. Before you head out, find out what the current fire danger is, particularly if you're just coming into the area and don't know what's been happening there lately. And if currently there's some fire restrictions, honor them. They're not trying to wreck your fun, they're trying to keep everybody safe. If there's fire rings, use them. If not, and the existing campsites have all sorts of different fire rings, don't make a new one. Use one that's already there. For fuel, only use fallen branches. And I'm saying branches, not even trees. You don't want to mess with the fallen trees. Those are habitat for a lot of critters. And obviously, I shouldn't have to say it, but I've seen it done. Don't cut out branches from live trees. If you're bringing firewood, you need to buy it locally so that way you're not inadvertently introducing a pest to the area. Most places now, this is mandatory. And I know it's not as fun or romantic, but a camp stove is a much more efficient and safer way to heat your food than a campfire. Plus, they leave no trace. You don't want to burn any garbage in your fire. There's a lot of people that would accept using toilet paper or paper products, and I personally don't have a problem with any of the non-coated papers, but the general rule of thumb is you're not supposed to burn your trash. And like my little soapbox, it never fails to amaze me how many cans and bottles I see in old campfires. Drives me batty. And surely these people know that metal and glass don't burn. Just shame on them. It's just not right. And always, always, always make sure your fire is attended at all times, and then completely, all capital letters, completely out before you go to bed or leave the campsite. That means stirring it, adding water, stirring it till there's no steam, no nothing coming out of that fire. And it's also respectful to you and to the wildlife to store your food properly. This is critical in bear country, and I'll put a link to the bear country episode as well. When you're in bear country, if they've got bear bins, use them, hooks, cages, whatever they're providing. If they provide something, use those first. Likewise, you want to use the tips I have in that episode on how to store your food properly so you don't attract bears to your campsite and cause a problem with bears for other campers in the future. And lastly, we all love and respect our rangers. A, let them know and thank them. And B, be sure if you see something that looks wrong, or sometimes if you see a carcass or large animal sightings, let them know. They are our eyes and ears and wisdom for the area. And be sure to seek them out before you go into the woods and then help them out on your way out. Be sure to check with them about the do's and don'ts of the area that you're visiting. Some of the things we discussed today aren't as fun as the way we used to do them. But as we're learning, it's getting so crowded out there. So unless we all work together and try to minimize our impact on the environment and on these wonderful treasures of places that we're visiting, and are courteous and respectful to each other, it's not going to be fun for our children, our grandchildren, or future generations. So let's all work together and do the best that we can to mind our manners the way our parents taught us, especially in the wild. I sure hope you found a couple of good nuggets in today's episode and have some food for thought that you can use in the wild. I would love to hear your feedback. You can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com, or if you forget, just go to the show notes or the website, and there's a contact button there, and you can reach out to me there. This is number 10 of our new show, and I haven't heard back from a whole lot of you. I would love to hear what you think of the new show. So if you wouldn't mind, please send me an email. Tell me what you like, tell me what you hate, and what else you'd like to hear about. Next up, I've got an episode on tent versus tarp. I go back and forth, but I have a favorite. I'd like to hear what yours is. So we'll be doing that in 2 weeks when I come back. And then next week on the Active Travel Adventures podcast, we're heading to the Tetons, one of the most beautiful mountain ranges in North America. I can't wait to share it with you. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Kit Parks. Adventure on.